arguably known as the world's greatest jazz trombonist. And his name is Wycliffe Gordon. Hi, Wycliffe.
Hello, Marcia, and hello, everyone on the Zoom call. How are you guys? Well, don't answer that question, but great
What's that?
to be here. No, I was saying, I asked everyone how they were doing, and I said, don't answer that question. There's too many,
It's still a lot of people. Hopefully everybody's doing great.
Yes.
I see that Gabriel knows how to use those emoticons that are on the Zoom function. So if you are joining us via video, please feel free to use the hand claps and the thumbs ups and all of that kind of stuff. So even though, I've known Wycliffe for a very long time, I still did my homework. And it was really amazing to see on paper as I started to print out his bio, the long version. I was pretty amazed at all of the things that he's accomplished in his career. So I'm going to start off with just sharing a few of those with you. This year, 2020, the Jazz Journalists Association named him Trombonist of the Year. This was, I think, his 13th time winning this accolade. Downbeat's Critic Poll also named him Best Trombone for 2020. I think that might have actually been his 6th time winning that award. He's a past recipient of the ASCAP Foundation Vanguard Award. In 2018, he received the Louie Award, honoring his dedication and commitment to the music of Louis Armstrong. If I'm not mistaken, and Wycliffe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think 2018 might have been the 50th anniversary. And this award was given to him by the Louis Armstrong Jazz Museum out east. He's received the International Trombone Association Award in 2017, which recognizes the highest level of creative and artistic achievement on the instrument. Really, the list goes on and on and on and on. And in addition to being an extremely successful solo artist, he tours regularly with his own quintet, which is known as Wycliffe Gordon, and his International All-Stars. He plays all of the biggest venues, most important venues all around the world. Excuse me. In addition to his performance career, he is a prolific composer. He might have an idea of how many songs he's composed at this point. I'm just going to take a stab and say that he probably has a catalog that is what, in the thousands at this point?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I have no idea. No, I don't, because I have a book of songs that are incomplete or, ideas. So, and there's years of that. So I'm not sure if I go that far and say thousands. After a while, some of them may start sounding the same or one influences the other.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go maybe with a cool few thousand tunes. That's just my unofficial word on that. Of course, I believe Wycliffe became most noticeable, or initially noticeable on the scene, as a member of Wynton Marsalis's septet. He's also a founding member of the Jazz Center Orchestra. And as you can see, I can go on and on and on and on. And he even has his own line of Yamaha instruments and mouthpieces, signature mouthpieces, which are by Pickett Brass. And if you have any interest in purchasing a Wycliffe Gordon mouthpiece, I can't guarantee you that you will sound like Wycliffe Gordon if you purchase it. But if you'd like to purchase one, you can find information for all of that, along with his methods books and some of his arrangements at www.wycliffegordon.com. Now, I like, word games. stuff like that. So I'm gonna start off tonight with a word association. You ready, Cliff?
I think so.
You think so? Okay. I think you can handle these words.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay. So and you can respond either with a word or a phrase that comes to mind. First one, of course, is jazz.
Jazz. Louis Armstrong, America.
Okay. Freedom.
Louis Armstrong, what America's supposed to represent. It's a phrase.
Okay. Okay, I'll let you slide with that one. Louis Armstrong.
Yeah. He's the epitome, the freedom to be himself, the freedom to express himself, the freedom to, and he always understood that. I mean, freedom can mean many things, but in the context of music and jazz, I tend to think about musicians that, that showed that it exuded from their playing and from their being. So.
Okay. Well, those are all the words that I have for you, and they're all, as everyone can hear, they're all kind of intermingled, intertwined there. So you're a Southern cat, right? You're from Georgia?
Yes, all day long.
All day long. Why don't you tell us a bit about Georgia, how Georgia figures into the beginnings of your career, the beginnings of your musical experiences?
Well, Georgia's the place where I just happen to have been born, in Waynesboro, Georgia. On top of that, my experience with music came from within our household. My father played piano. He studied classical piano, and he played the practical application of his musicianship would be shown in church. So he played gospel. He played hymns and spirituals. He could read music, and so he was a church pianist in Waynesboro. I think he played about 3 or 4 church jobs that he had, but he exposed us to music, and my mother always supported us through it. But the music that we heard was classical piano music, and he's a radio man in the military, the Air Force. So he had his upright grand piano, and he put his reel-to-reel tape on it and put speakers through the wall, and he was playing for us the music of Beethoven and Schumann and Schubert. It was all classical piano music. So that's what we kind of heard in the house growing up. Outside of the house, we heard gospel music. Of course, that would be in the church. And on the radio in Waynesboro, you may hear some country music or whatever the popular music was at that time. Delta Dawn, Once That Flower, I remember those things. And I didn't really come into jazz until later. But classical music was a part of our upbringing, and there was always music in the house. And I do remember we had a record player, and we had this, I think it was a 45 of Mahalia Jackson. She sang "Go Tell It on the Mountain" on one side, and on the other side was "When I Get to Heaven, I'm Gonna Sit Down." And I remember, played that record so much, but the records, they were kind of dual purpose. You could actually throw them like frisbees, which, if I saw my kids do that nowadays, I'd probably flip my lid, but we were children. So anyway, but that was the beginnings of my introduction to music. And my dad did try to get us to take lessons because he taught piano lessons, but as a boy at the age of 5 or 6, it's hard to play through ding, 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 when you hear outside, hey, throw the ball. All the boys were playing. It's like, Daddy, I don't want to do this. So, he didn't make us take lessons, but I started to take piano lessons a little later, and that was just right before I found the trombone, and still a few years before I heard jazz the first time. So.
Okay. So speaking of that, what was your foray into jazz? How did you find yourself there in that space?
Well, my older brother Lucius went to junior high school, and back then you had to have you could have up to 3 electives. One had to be PE, according to the American Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. So you could take wood shop, automotive shop, home economics. And you know, young boys, we always thought home ec, that's a girls' class. Little did we know. But he decided to be in band. He wanted to play the trumpet, like all, you know, boys want to play trumpet or saxophone or, you know, drums. But band director said, yeah, I think you'd be better suited on the trombone. And, you know, I don't know if any kids that really want to play the trombone say, hey, I want to play the trombone. I mean, it exists. But I started playing trombone because my older brother played. I come home one day from elementary school and it was laying there in the case on the floor, and I was like, and I knew it was a musical instrument because, like I said, we heard piano music growing up in the house. But when I was in the first grade, I heard of a jazz band or a stage band, and it was the United States Army Band, and they came to our school and they played. I was like, wow, man, a band. And then the instruments would demonstrate the saxophone and then the trombone and then the trumpet. I said, okay, they talked about that in church, going down, you know, the walls of Jericho. Piano, I heard that all my life. Bass, I was like, oh, it's kind of cool, electric bass. But then the drummer was like, boom, doom. You heard low pitches, high pitches. And I was like, that's it. I want to play drums. And of course, I was told no from first grade through the 12th grade. There would be no drums playing in our household. We made enough noise. But that's kind of how I found trombone. My brother Lucius was 1 year older. He got a dump truck. I wanted one. He got ice cream. I wanted some. Come home with a trombone. I was like, okay, I want one of those too. Sometimes musicians say you find the instrument or the instrument finds you. And you asked me about jazz. I'm sorry, that's a roundabout way to get to it. But about a year or two after playing, my great aunt, who lived in Boston, she passed. And amongst the things that were given to our family was a 5-record collection set of jazz. It was called the Anthology of Jazz, and it was in a compilation that had everything from the early slave chants to the modern jazz of that time, which included Sonny Rollins Quartet playing like do boo 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 do do do, Sunny Moon for Two, and the Count Basie Orchestra playing 1 bass hit or 2 bass hit. But out of all of that, from the slave chants to the stride piano on up to the big band and beyond, I fell in love with the music from New Orleans. And it just said, New Orleans music, and particularly that of Louis Armstrong. And in that compilation was this tune with him and his Hot Sevens called the Keyhole Blues. And at that time in high school, we were into the popular music of our day. Matter of fact, if you could play do 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 ba 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 dee ba da do ba do dee do do do, that was jazz for us. Chuck Mangione and Herb Alpert.
Right.
But I'd be out in our garage listening to Louis Armstrong and things like that. So my friends used to pick at me. They say, we all love jazz, but Cliff, he liked that deep jazz. I was like, okay. So that's the short, if I can call it short, way down jazz. So
that's the short long version.
Yeah, pretty much.
Short long version.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're in Georgia. I'm just going to take a guess and say that you became very active in your high school marching band program. Kind of, sort of, yeah, no.
Well, not one march. It was just band.
Just band. Okay.
I was in 7th grade when I started, and then my brother went to ninth grade. I was in the eighth grade. And that was the last year of what they called junior high school. And we moved to the middle school system. So grades 9, so instead of high school being 10 through 12, it's 9 through 12. So so it was just band. We were in the concert band. It wasn't a jazz band. We said stage band. Yes, and we were in marching band, junior high and through 4 years of high school. But it's
Okay.
just whatever band program. I did everything band. Concert band, one
You
ensemble,
did.
one ensemble. If it had something to do with music, I want to do it. So
Okay. So after high school, you attended Florida A&M University. And for anyone who may not know, Florida A&M University is one of the historically Black colleges and universities in the United States. And they have for years had a fantastic reputation. They're actually their marching band, which goes by the name, their school acronym, FAMU Marching 100. Only because I don't really remember, but wait, you were a member of the Marching 100, right?
I was all 4 years in college.
And how did you choose FAMU?
Well, I was attracted by, I was kind of attracted by the marching band. I felt like the band program was known. So I figured, well, maybe the music department is the same. So, I mean, initially I was attracted by the marching band. And by the time I graduated high school, I played with the McDonald's All-American High School Band. So I had scholarship offers to go to several schools, and I just, I selected FAMU, and I said, yeah, that's where I want to go. And just that was the most appealing thing to me, at that time. And that's also where I met Winton during my sophomore year. But regardless of the, like how the trombone found me, maybe everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. And it happens for a reason, and it happens in the way that it is supposed to happen. So
now, I'm going to ask you this question only because I know.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, you stalled. Were you saying something else?
No, you got it. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask you this because I'm sure a lot of people want to know, especially like our younger attendees, any of the students, high school students, and some of the college students. Now, when you just mentioned that that's where you met Winton, that you were in school at FAMU. How did your professional relationship with him start? Did he just show up on campus one day, with this band, and he's like, hey, I want you to go with us on the road? Or was he like, hey, I think you're saying a little bit of something, but I need you to say something a little more, so I'm going to circle back around to you? How did that kind of get going? How did you become a member of his septet?
Not quite like that. If I were paraphrasing, I could say that, but he was invited by our student government association to speak during Black History Month in February of 1987. And, he was a friend of mine, Scotty Barnhart, who was at FAMU at the time, who's now the musical director of the Count Basie Orchestra. He knew Winton pretty well, being a trumpeter and all. And I was like, yeah, I heard of him. He's won Grammys in classical and jazz music, but I'm listening to Louis Armstrong, so I'm sure Winton's pretty good. Anyway, he did come to our school to give a lecture because they didn't want to spend the money to pay to have his band to play. So he came and did like a lecture demonstration for us. But he got there early in the day. And he came by our jazz band rehearsal, and it was one of the days that everyone actually showed up. Everyone came to rehearsal that day, and when went and talked to us, and he just he talked to us about jazz, answered questions, and then he talked about the Count Basie Orchestra and how Count Basie's band is, they're riff based, a lot of call and response riffs. And he said, someone would just start playing a blues and someone soloing, and then somebody from the section would come up with a riff, maybe harmonize it, and before you know it, you have a tune. Like you think about Count Basie's music, 1 o'clock jump. It's all riff beats, repeated phrases. And so he talked with us and he said, matter of fact, let's do that. Rhythm section, play a blues and B flat, and somebody come up with a riff and, harmonize it. And I was like, well, for me, that was easy. Having heard New Orleans music, having grown up in the church where you hear the call and response between, say, a solo vocalist and the choir, or the preacher in the congregation, I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. It's riffing. So I came over with riff. Trumpet section, saxophones were still struggling a little bit. Anyway, after about 3 or 4 choruses, went and cut the band off and said, I reached down on the pick some of the floor. When I sat back up, the guys in the section, they were pointing to me. So I guess went to ask who came up with the riff. He just kind of, gave me a funny look. Anyway, he did his presentation that night. Scotty Barnhart told me, say, hey, when he said, what's that trombone player's name? And he said, are you talking about Wycliffe? And went and said, what the hell kind of name is Wycliffe? I said, and when Scotty told me that, I'm like, well, what the hell kind of name is Winton? I never heard of a Winton before, but anyway. So, that was that. But over that next year, Marcus Roberts, who was playing in his band, lived in Tallahassee. Marcus would get with them and rehearse with him. And anyway, again, to make a long story short, Winton had Marcus to call me about 1.5 years later to go play Caravan of Dreams in Fort Worth, Texas. And he was trying me out for the band, or better yet, for a recording he was doing called Majesty of the Blues. I was unprepared because I was playing electric bass in the funk band. The tune that was popular back during that time was, called, it was Doing the Butt. And on the HBCU campus, that was a pretty popular song, and where you can see it done very well. So anyway, so I'm like, I went to Texas and I was unprepared. And I was like, man, because they were rehearsing during the sound check, and then they played that night. And I said, if Tallahassee was not so far from Fort Worth, I'd walk out the back of this club and walk home. I wasn't ready for it. I mean, the level of musicianship. And they called me up to play on, blues or something like Handle. And but by the end of the week, between Marcus and Winston, they gave me 3 or 4 sheets, 2 columns on each side of records to buy and go and just start checking out. And I started doing that. So 8-10 months later, went and called me once again to Blues Alley to play. And he was, again, trying me out. He was working on music for his holiday CD, Crescent City Christmas card. Okay. So I was playing a little better, probably not making a whole lot of noise, but he said, hey, at the end of that week, he said, I'm going to record this CD. You want to play on the CD? I was like, yeah. That was in 88, the summer of 89. February, March of 89, we recorded the CD. He said, what are you doing during the summer? We're doing during the summer. I said, construction work, something where I go home and make money to pay for books and rent when I go back to school. He said, you want to come out and play during the summer? I said, yeah, sure. I called him on my birthday, 1989, May 29th. I said, hey, when school's out, I'm out of school, getting ready to go home for the summer. He said, call my manager, Ed Arendelle. And I called him, and they flew me to Charleston, South Carolina for the Spoleto Festival. And that was my first gig. 3 or 4 days later, we're down in Aruba. Eric Reed, who's a little younger than I and was in college, was not happy where he was in school. And Winton and I was, we were at his room, and he said, I want to talk to you about, college to go to. I went and said, I went to college for 1 year, talk to Wycliffe. I said, well, at that time, Winton's dad had left University, Virginia Commonwealth University, and started teaching at University of New Orleans. I wanted to go and get like a jazz education in a jazz city that I loved, because of Louis Armstrong. And I said, man, went and I said, man, I don't know where you should go. I said, I'm thinking about transferring schools. And went and said, what? I thought everything was cool. I said, well, and then he asked me, he said, well, do you want to stay out here and play for a while? And it took me about all of 10 seconds. And I said, yeah.
I bet.
So my summer gig turned into my career that led to everything from, playing on the road. I was the seventh member. I made the band, my position made it the septet. And, from master classes to workshops to composition and arranging on another level, I got exposed to some of the greatest musicians, the greatest musical situations, and traveled to colleges, universities, and conservatories. And I remember I'm gonna stop after this. Those first master classes, went to let me tag along with him. He'd go do a workshop at a school. And we were in New York City, maybe. We went to a high school, and man, it was treacherous. Those kids, ask kids, what Marcellus said, like, where's that? And and I understand everyone doesn't know him, but man,
Right.
it was so bad. It was just so bad. They didn't listen. They didn't want to hear what they had to say. They were into what they were into, and I was like, wow. And I just kept, tagging along. And I listened to him do interviews and things like that. And every now and then he would say, I don't feel like doing this interview, Cone. You've been around, me enough. Why don't you do this interview? And he'd give me the phone, and I'd do an interview as if it'd be funny. But we just kind of grew together on the road. I mean, Winton had been out for a while, but I kind of grew up as a musician and also, as a man as much as I did. I still think I'm a little boy, but on the road that's where it started.
Okay. You actually kind of pulled in a number of things that I was going to ask you. One of the questions that I was going to ask you was how did your experience in the Wynton Marsalis septet impact your growth musically, professionally, and personally?
It's something that sticks with me to this day. I was talking about a couple of things. You asked about Winton. Failed to mention that at Florida A&M, sometimes folks ask me about that marching band experience. Do you think that it is something that is
I think
helps
pretty
in your
much.
professional life? And I said, yeah, because it wasn't always just about the music and the show. And I remember clearly one night we were rehearsing. It was Thursday night. The game is Saturday. We'd have to have like time show down pat Thursday, and it was it was like 11 o'clock, 11:15, 11:30. It was raining, and we were doing the halftime show, and we took the halftime show in the rain. I'm talking about on out the field where we marched, mud and everything. And we finished the show, standing at attention. It's just pouring down rain. Dr. Foster he said, man, that was pretty good, but it's not good enough for the March 100. Take it again. And I was just like, what? And it just kind of taught us that no matter what the obstacles are or whatever gets in your way, you can still do your best, make it look like your best. Don't let the sunshine stop you from giving you all the rain, the snow. Anyway, then moving forward with Winton Band, I remember a thing that I tell students of the music, which I still am, all of the time now. We would always talk about the music after we get off the gig. One night we played the gig, we get on the bus, whether it's back to the hotel, we talk about events or something that happened in a given night. If we have like bus events before we start watching movies and listening to music. But one of the greatest feelings ever is, sometimes the guys will play and walk off the stage and say, hey man, I'm sorry, forgive me for how I sound tonight. And we're like, what are you talking about? You sounded great. And then we would have, that night, we're going for something and we hear it, but we don't quite get it. And it's just like, it was right there. And then, and then there's the antithesis of that when somebody, because when we're on the road about 275, 300 days a year, If we're making, one-nighters, the concert's probably going to be good and the people are going to enjoy it, but we're together all that time. So we know, the, the pros and cons, the in and out, the good and the bad, what's going on with the band on and off the bandstand. So might be a night with Wes. It's like, man, you just stepped off. You're like, Wes, well, you hear something, and it's that time that where he was apologizing before he caught it. And it's just like, wow, man, he was on fire tonight, man. You just feel it. And we all have those moments. And I mean, but a bad night for those cats is still killing. But the one of the greatest moments or feelings I would have in music is when it would happen with the whole band. And out of 275, 300 days, it may happen once or twice a year. And that's where the band is playing. It's nothing, that we plan. And 9 times out of 10 is never recorded. And it's like everything that you go for, it works. And even if, like, you're playing with, Herlin, Eric, and Ville, and you're playing on stage and you get into everything that you done worked on, changes, rhythm, this, rhythm, that, harmonic, this, and harmonic, that. And then everything just like popping and everybody in the band feels it. We get on the bus that night and we be like, we're kind of quiet and say, man, it happened again. When you playing and you don't even feel your feet touching the floor. And I'm like, and you always want to get back to that. So that was, I think, what I remember most from playing with that band, those moments. But that comes when you're playing with the same, you're playing and you're growing with the same people all the time. We were there for one another's marriages, children being born, divorces. I mean, we lived through a lot with each other, and we kind of grew up together on the road. And for a few years, it was pretty, pretty amazing. So
Yeah.
And I've been in situations that have been cool, but that one is like we were always and when we walk on the bandstand, it was no, not putting anybody down for how they dress. Our thing was tied when we stepped on the bandstand. Everybody was clean.
Oh yeah.
It's just like and even if Reginald and Herman didn't play in their coats, when they walked on the bandstand, they presented themselves. It's like, man, then take the coats off and start taking care of business. But I love it. I miss it. And some things like that we kind of take for.
Yeah.
I do, because I go to performances now, and well, I mean, it's not necessarily about the clothing, but your whole statement. People see you before they hear you. I mean, yeah, it's important what you play, but it's also very important what you look like, because the people, you're only going to sound as good. And I'm kind of, sound cliche. You're only going to sound as good as you look, because if you come out and you kind of raggy, you may be playing great, but
right.
it may not translate. But if you come in and you take the opportunity to make a statement before you even open your mouth about who you are as a musician and what you think about your presentation, it's I think all of that is important. And I see we get away from it. And anyway, I remember the days when it felt.
I agree with you. I also think it's a nice way to show respect for the people who've shown up to watch you, who've shown up to see you. I think it demands or commands a certain level of respect, and it shows the respect to the audience. Thank you so much for sharing all of that about those years. What you gonna say?
No, I said, you may walk past some people working outside on the way to the gig, but that's not really what you want to see when you get there. And I know people. I know we have I don't even really debate about it, but it's like you took the time to work this out. If you're wearing um, tonight on the gig what you had on all day, and you were moving furniture, whatever whatever you're doing,
Mhm.
that can be cool. But yeah, if I'm gonna, well, you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying.
And sometimes you, as a band leader, you have to. I made the mistake of telling a band. I played a formal function one time, and the person that hired me said, it's kind of casual. Well, their casual was formal. And I told my band, I said, so casual, but casual to me meant like this, no tie. I don't have a coat on. My coat is on the back of my chair because it's hot down here in Georgia and in my house. But, that meant we're going to have on slacks, dress socks, dress shoes, a coat, a shirt, and no tie. You can wear a necklace or something. But I said casual, and they showed up. My bass player had flip-flops on and his toes were out. And I mean, they were a little bit ashy, but that really wasn't the point. I'm like, who wears flip-flops on a gig? And we're not playing on.
Oh, you should see who wears flip-flops today. You thought you wondered who wore flip-flops back then. Take a look today at some of the feet.
Yeah. Well, this 15, 20 years ago, but I learned my lesson. I mean, my band said, what's the dress? I said, we're not going to wear a tie, but, dress. And if you want to dress down after you get hot and start, take your coat or something off. Some people say, you mind if I wear a dust? I said, bro, you know how we do. Just come to the gig presenting your, being presentable. All right, I'll be quiet about that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm kind of, I need to check on two things. The first thing I need to be mindful or would like to be mindful of is time. So, Mark, if you're listening, if you could let me know where we are with time. And then the second thing, I did see a question pop up here in the chat. If you don't mind, Wycliffe, I'll go ahead. Let's see. I have a statement and a question. The statement is from Tom Gard. Tom Gard says, Wycliffe, you're always the first video I show prospective 5th grade band kids for the very reason you mentioned. I want you to know that I get kids to pick up the trombone every year because they see you play. Keep spreading that gospel, sir. So that was from Tom Gard.
Oh, and wow.
Isn't that cool? You're changing the mind of an entire generation about the instrument that I call, that slidey thing. The slide instrument.
Yep.
And I'm sure I'm holding my hands all wrong. So everybody out in Zoom land, just go ahead and laugh now. I just know you'd go something like this and something like that. And then, did I look like I was doing aerobics?
No, you were either playing left-handed like Slide Hampton, or you was doing that thing they used to sell on television where you strengthen your. You started doing like this.
Okay, well, see now, take that idea. You can take that idea and market that. Just give me creative credit, and now you have turned your instrument into a multi-purpose instrument, and I'm responsible. What's that?
I say, yeah, that'll happen. It's not really that high on the priority list, but I'm sure I'll get to it one day.
Okay, I'll remind you. Let's see, we have a question. Oh, this is actually a good question. Not that any questions are bad, all questions are really good. Can you talk a bit, this is from Jake Marble. Can you talk a bit about what an average day in your life looks like these days? Specifically your practice routines, day-to-day commitments, etc. And
My days nowadays is I spend a lot on Zoom. I mean, because of COVID and where we are and everything else going on in the world. I spend a lot of time on the computer, even though it's not ideal, even when it comes to teaching lessons, and making music. So average day, I'm on a computer 3 or 4 hours a day. Practice routines. I don't have a practice routine any more. I'm in my music room with a tuba, about 7 or 8 trombones, flugelhorn, trumpet, clarinet, 2 pianos, A100 organ, keyboards, and a Pro Tools. It was a garage. It's now my music room. I spend time writing, and I've been making videos for folks. But if you'd like for me to share with you the practice routine that I give to all of my students, I'd be happy to share it with you. I've been threatening to put out a book for 15, 20 years now called Basic Training. And I do have a book called Sing It First, which deals with one of the concepts that would be in the basic training book. But my practice routine, when I did have a daily practice, a physical practice routine when I was working on pedagogy on my instrument, would take no less than 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. And it had nothing to do with jazz. It was lip flexibility exercises, slurs, slur exercises, which alone, just to do those, that would take 45 minutes, alone. Endurance exercises, I would only do 2 or 3 times a week because when you do those, and we can set up a lesson or something, and I'll be glad to demonstrate it, but it's a pounding on your face. And you don't want to do that when it's to build up your endurance, but you want to do it little by little. Breathing exercises. There was a regiment that I would go through, but I did it for many years. I used to do long tones. I don't really do those anymore, but I'm happy to share that with you. My email is wycliffe@wycliffegordon.com. I'll send it to you. And if you want to set up a lesson or something at some point in time, I can demonstrate some of those things for you.
Okay, and just in case you didn't catch Wycliffe's email address, it is wycliffe@wycliffegordon.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, wycliffe@wycliffegordon.com. That's pretty easy. And if you happen to forget that, go to the website and you can reach out to him. Let's take a look and see if we have something else here. It looks like we're just about out of time, Wycliffe.
It's okay. I'll take those questions. I'll go till I'll complete the hour.
Okay, thank you. Much appreciated. So Jason Gillette has a thank you for you. He says, thanks for always bringing so much joy to your clinics and performances over the years. I've had the honor of seeing and hearing you live about 15 times. Wow. 15 times. What if he's only 15 years old? What if he's 15 years old? If Jason's only 15?
Hey, that'd be great too. I have some of my, I don't really have a fan club, but some of my favorite fans are the young children. There's I can't think of her name right now, but I get emails from the parents of some children that will see something on the internet and start imitating the trombone or the plunging and things like that. So, Matt, that's Matt, Jason, whoever whoever asked that question, made that comment. Thanks for continuing to come. And there was a question before that, but and then I see someone said something about Western dance. When we are on the road, I say we work at our craft, but we play music. We don't work music. We play music. So when we're playing, we're having fun. I mean, it's serious business, but man, it's fun. And people will ask me, when are you gonna retire? I'm like, from this? I said, when I stop breathing. I mean, you ever hear about the people that say, man, I can't wait to go on vacation. We can't wait to go on vacation from, and it's cool. Vacations are nice. They're cool. But I look at my life as like a vacation. I wake up every day going to do something that I love doing. You know, only drag about it, we in COVID now, but the only drag about it pre-COVID was travel. I mean, after 9/11, you couldn't. I remember when folks could walk on the plane with you. And, we make all these adjustments with what's going on, but that's what we do as jazz musicians and creative people. We always wake up every day trying to come up with a solution. How am I going to approach this C major 9 chord? How am I going to work on my range? That's what we do. Improvise, taken from the word improve. So that was one question you missed from Adrian Anderson. Where do you think you would have taken your career without meeting someone big like Wynton Marsalis in college? That I don't know, because there was a time when I wouldn't sing, and now everything I do, it's, and I'm not talking about singing songs. I'm talking about for pedagogical practice. I run into people that say, "Well, I can't improvise. I study classical music. I don't improvise." I said, "No, the great classical soloists, they improvised. That's what they were doing. It's just classical music had a language. Whether you're dealing with the 4 periods of classical music, whether you're dealing with the various idioms of jazz, early jazz, how you would play on a traditional jazz tune versus how you play on bebop." And I try to get my students, in which I'm still one, to learn the whole history of the music. Because once you do that, if you know early jazz, if you play piano, you can play stride piano, you can play all the idioms of jazz piano from, and then even gospel. You can work any and everywhere. So I'm a firm believer that what happened, it happened the way it was supposed to happen. Like, I never thought I would sing, but that's all I talk about now when I'm teaching my students. Put your horn down and sing. You want to learn how to improvise? I do it in front of a class all the time. If I was in front of you guys, I'd be like, sing what I'm saying. And then you go, and I say, and you hear, and you'll imitate when I'm singing, and I'll stop and I'll say, "What key are we singing in?" And the only people that will probably answer that question are the perfect pitch geeks and not in the and it's like, but it didn't matter what key I was in. You made music. So when you get behind an instrument and you step behind a piece of music and you turn on your "This is how I learn," that's the only thing that you have to break. And I've worked with classical musicians and jazz alike, and within 5 minutes they're improvising. I was like, wow, everyone can do that. So had I not met Wynton, I think, who knows what would have happened. I say, man, if I in my career, I'd sing from the beginning. I was like, sing? I don't need to sing. I'm a trombone player. I can learn the melodies. And I tell all my students now, find a song that you're comfortable singing, because when you sing, people hear how you play differently. When you sing, you connect to your instrument differently. The instrument is an extension of the voice, even if you're playing percussion instrument. So anyway, I'm not going to turn this into a master class about that, but yeah. So where would I be with someone big like Wynton? I don't know. Maybe I would have met him after college. Who knows?
Well, since you did kind of go into the education area in your conversation, I want to give you an opportunity before we wrap this evening to talk a bit more about your career as an educator. Specifically, if you can kind of put all of this in a nice little box and wrap it up with a pretty bow. What do you think of the state of jazz education today? There are like 3 questions. What do you think of the state of jazz education today? What changes would you like to see on the institutional side? And what kinds of changes or modifications would you like to see with regards to what the new or what the next college level jazz student looks like. And then at the end of all of that, if you could mention a bit about ATMA, only because you brought up classical music and you're starting to get doing a little bit of
Okay.
music history there.
Well, I'll try to tie them all together. So ask the first question again.
First question, what do you think of the state of jazz education today?
Well, I think it's great. I'm just going to share my opinion. It's great because you have people that are that are in the know. There was a time when even at Florida A&M, it was shunned upon to have jazz studies as a part of the program because it was not a part of the Eurocentric model for what you needed to be a fully educated musician.
Mm.
And we know that things have changed now. So I think it's great if to seeking information. So a lot of years ago, it's like, man, I got to go to University of North Texas. I'm going to go to Miami, and there were certain schools. But now with the implementation of jazz studies programs, and several and quite a few educational institutions, I'm glad to see that turnaround. That was really disturbing that I went to an HBCU and find out that once I left, I kind of heard about it. Cannonball and Matt Adderley, two of our giants in jazz, attended university there, and they played in the marching band, but they weren't allowed to play jazz on campus.
Wow.
Things would be said. And it's not about jazz education. It's just education in general. I think it's very important. Don't play jazz in this practice room. You're going to mess up the acoustics of the room. Don't play jazz on that instrument. You're going to damage the instrument. And this would be people that had, they had terminal degrees, PhDs, and why would they say that? And it's like, man, it deals with everything that kind of goes into ATMA, which we're trying to address in all of our education system and in our education period. And that you have to just kind of deal with what became systematically racist, and to go and see that at an HBCU, I was like, wow. I did get to play in the jazz band when I was there, but when Cannonball and Nat went to Florida A&M in the '60s, they couldn't play jazz on campus. They weren't allowed to. So I think that the state of education is great, but I think that for all of you students of the music, you want to be aware of what you're listening to. Some of our colleagues will say something as simple, and especially to our young folks, because they're very impressionable, don't use the real book when you're learning to play, check out the recordings. Or some people even say don't use the Jamie Abrosol. You got to play with a real band. I'm from Burke County, from Waynesboro, Georgia, and I grew up in Augusta. This was gospel town, and James Brown was from here, funk town. It wasn't really known as a jazz town. So when I had to audition for the all county band, all we had was Jamie Abrosol. He said, play 3 chords of a blues in F. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we had to play, but that's all we had. So I would I would just pull my colleagues' coattail because sometimes, and I've heard friends of mine say it, and you tell students, well, don't do this and don't do that, because that's where you are in your development. And, don't transcribe. What do you mean don't transcribe? That's how you learn how to talk. You're transcribing your parents, your brother, sister, cat, dog, whatever it is that you heard. That was how you learn how to interact. So anyway, I think the state of jazz education is good. We just have to be mindful. Teaching is very important because once you start teaching, you get to find out everything that you don't know. Because now you're riddled with having to educate and to influence some students about what it is that you know. So, and oftentimes it doesn't have anything to do with what you know. Now it's, trying to get students interested in coming to class, let alone something where they get the information like this. It's like you
Mhm.
ask them something and they do this. Boom. When we were in high school, and not to sound like my parents, but I guess we do to a certain degree, we had to go check a book out. We didn't have the answer right then and there. And part of the problem with that is
Mhm.
I've had students to ask me, I said, practicing melodious etudes and arbans, that's good, but what's the shortcut to being able to play? I said the shortcut is the straightest line from where you standing to a practice room. They don't have an app for that. You still have to go through that process. So anyway, I know I kind of went roundabout, but the you know your jazz age should be great if you keep your mind open and aware. There was another question I forgot, the second or the third one.
Oh, what changes would you like to see on the institutional side in terms of jazz, in terms of how the jazz education programs are structured at
Um,
university?
to me, I don't think that I think jazz education is great. I just don't think in today's America that it's going to be enough. We're still, we're still, um, I'm saying, fighting to get it in, but jazz and I'd say contemporary music. Look at the music that comes from America. American music should become a part of our studies, and that's what we at
Mhm.
ATMA are trying to do, because our system that says you are now qualified to be a music teacher and you are qualified to be a musician with these studies. When I
Mhm.
studied the grout history of Western music, they're talking about George Gershwin, which was great, but no mention of Duke Ellington, one of the most prolific
Right.
composers from the United, yeah, from the United, from America. And it's like, I think it's important that we include American music, because when you listen to the music that our students are making when they leave, yes, we can study Beethoven and Bach, and we can study Rachmaninoff. I think all those things are great. But where all the where are the jobs? What are they going to create? For themselves. And I think it's high time for us to open that door in America, because other countries, I've seen it since the early '90s.
Mhm.
They love this music. You
Yeah.
know, when you have the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, who were they listening to? They were listening to blues musicians from America. And when Mick Jagger comes over, he said, "No, I was just listening to Howlin' Wolf. I was copying what he was doing."
Right.
They became big mega stars. What happened to a lot of those guys? They got $50 and a fifth of whiskey, and so there's a lot of things that cause the culture to be like it is. And I think once we start to deal with those things and to address, when you can look on the internet and see a Japanese teenage band playing the music of what is hip, or they're playing the music of James Brown, a Tower of Power, and killing it. I'm like, they love this music. Yes,
Yeah.
they may
Yeah.
know that they may know their traditional music, but it just seems like in America, um, we still have a ways to go. We're still caught up on and that's not to take away the Eurocentric way of teaching, but to add to it, because
Yes.
we in America
Yes.
have made a great contribution, and jazz being the main one, but there are other music, the folk music that comes out of America. I mean, anyway, I should be quiet because I know I've gone over time, and some people ask some questions.
Well, I just really quick want to clarify, in what you just shared with us, you mentioned ATMA, and I would like to clarify for our audience what ATMA is. ATMA is an acronym for an organization that was created, or kind of, I think, got going, yeah, created this past summer, and it stands for the Alliance for the Transformation of Musical Academe. I looked that word up
Mhm.
because I wanted
Yeah,
to be sure
I
that I.
started. It's something that's been in the works for a while, and the gentleman is Dr. Ed Sarath, who teaches at the University of Michigan, and he's been kind of pushing this. He did a book called Black Music Matters, and when somebody told me about that book, at first I was kind of a little kind of teed off about it. I was like, wait a minute, such and such, and blah blah blah. So we met last September at the University of Dayton. We had to go on our own time. I wanted to go see what the hubbub was about. And there were
Mhm.
people like Dr. Ted McDaniels, who's retired from Ohio State University, who did many things. Well, we had to start. I mean, the history of HBCUs, and it was because of our history in the United States. We weren't allowed to go to college anywhere else. So this, like Ted McDaniels, they had to create um, ways where our music, and particularly jazz, but also gospel. When you talk about Reverend Dr. Dwight Andrews from Atlanta, who plays jazz, he's a pastor or minister, and he plays jazz saxophone and flute. And one of the hippest photos I ever saw him was in his robe as a pastor, and he's holding his saxophone. I'm like, man, that it's and I'm kind of getting but um, I think the recognition that it deserves, you see it on television, but you know, um, I think it's high time that we make it a part of our educational institutions, and we probably need to loosen the reins because of that meeting back in September. Someone said, "Well, who's gonna teach this? Who's the experts? And they were thinking the expert had to be someone with a PhD. I was like, no, you have
Mhm.
experts in gospel music that may not even have a bachelor's in music. Because I said, I can name several, but then you have those, like a friend of mine, Daniel Sneed, who had, he's gone, he went to Howard Peabody, and he's working on his doctoral
Right.
dissertation, or he's finished in choral conducting. So they're musicians that are in the know, that are educated, have the
Mhm.
terminal degrees, but some of the experts that you'll find on this music, like if you listen to the United House of Prayer, I think that I'm safe in saying that most of them, I went to rehearsal, a lot of them didn't read music because that's not how they learn their craft. But if you listen to it, and if you stand in front of it and you're not moved, then you might want to check your pulse. But anyway, so I'm sorry, I got long winded.
It's okay. Well, we've kept you a long time this evening. I know that everyone who attended the Jazz Circle this evening feels enriched and blessed. Again, many thanks to you, Wycliffe Gordon, for joining us. Many thanks to everyone in the audience for logging in and supporting the Milwaukee Jazz Institute's Jazz Circle. Wycliffe is a very accessible person. So if you have a question that you were not able to ask, or you have a statement that you'd like to share with him, please feel free to email him at wycliffegordon.com. And again, at wycliffegordon.com, www.wycliffegordon.com, you can find information, everything from his itinerary, his current COVID itinerary, to information about his publications, videos, big band arrangements, anything. If you want to buy a mouthpiece, I'm pushing mouthpieces. I wouldn't even. Here's my extent of my experience with a mouthpiece. My uncle Myron is a trumpet player. Actually, he played the flugelhorn, and he hung out in my grandma's basement. And when I thought that he wasn't in the basement, I would sneak downstairs and go in his horn case and try to blow into his mouthpiece. And all I will tell you is that I remember it being one of the most painful experiences ever. I was little, I was a little girl. And one time he actually tried to show me how to, I guess create an embouchure or something like that. I really wasn't paying, too into that. But that's all I know about mouthpieces. But I do know that my friend has a signature series of them. Again, if you'd like to support the Milwaukee Jazz Institute, you may visit us at www.milwaukeejazzinstitute.org. You will also find information about our upcoming events. So thank you again for joining us for this extended jazz circle, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you all for having me. And
you're welcome.
Last thing, those are questions someone asked. What would one piece of advice would I give to a young musician? What would it be? To do what you love, and I want to encourage everyone to check out something by Louis Armstrong. Do what you love to do. You know, something when you wake up in the morning, you look forward to going to work. You know, you may have to catch a plane, you may have to drive in traffic, but if you're doing something that you love, it's something. It's not work. It's something that you work at it, but it's something that you don't mind doing. So, but check out this thing called "Play for Someone You Love." If you haven't heard it, as a musician or not, I think that you will appreciate. It's about Louis Armstrong and someone telling a story about him and that very thing that I just said. It's 7 minutes and 48 seconds, but it's worth it's on YouTube. It's worth the listen. It's hard for me. I've heard it many times for me to listen and to not get full or teary-eyed because it expresses what what I feel about music and life. And that's why when Marcia asked me at the beginning of this, she said, freedom. I said, Louis Armstrong. She said, potato chips. I said, Louis Armstrong. Yeah, I mean, but check that out. And that's it. I'm going to say good night. Thank you all so much.
Have a good night, Wycliffe, and good night, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.